Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences. Welcome to the East West Show. Jack Chow on the East West Show with GNE TV. Starting many years ago, every now and then we talk about our water because California is having a drought that is unprecedented for 100 and 150 years. Everybody knows that. Everybody has experienced last year, especially last summer and the summer before, how dry we have been. Starting this year, we started to see a little water. Lots of people feel overjoyed, say, oh, finally we see some water, right? So are we doing better? Are we doing the same? Are we doing worse? What are we supposed to do? Lots of questions here. Every time, like I say, we have a crying baby, bring the baby to the mother or mothers. Now, the mothers be you, my dear friend, Mr. Ken Manning for California Water Quality, and Mr. Tony Zampiello, California Water Master. To those of you, you are the water guy. In the old days, you guys supposed to be rich.
Yeah, yeah, those days are gone.
Those days are gone, right? Yeah. So, well, welcome to both of you to the show. Back to the show, I would say.
Thank you.
Very good. Question starts very automatic because how are we doing with water now? With the rain we had, and still with the rain ahead. The forecast says that this whole week till Saturday, even Sunday, going to be very wet. So how are we doing on water? Tony?
Well, you know, I'll tell you in general, if you compare, I think we were just starting to see a wet winter from last winter when we talked to you. Mm-hmm. Last year we got, the long-term average is about 18 inches of rain. We got 20 inches of rain last year. Had record snowfall in the northern part of the state. We've talked about how we have kind of almost two different situations at times between the Southern California and Northern California. This year we thought that we would continue that pattern, but we're only at about 2 inches of rain at the beginning, coming into the beginning of this month.
I see.
The average for this period would be about 16, 17 inches going into March, and then the end of March, hopefully we'd get, our average is 18. So we're way behind. We haven't measured these new storms because they've happened so fast. And so we really have a situation where we'll probably by the end of March, 1st of April, still be only at about 5 inches of rain, and normal rain's about 18. So
I see.
So the good thing is that from the rain last year, we were able to, and the snow in the north, we were able to work some deals with some of the regional agencies to actually bring some water down from Northern California and put it in our basin. So we're 10 feet above our historic low.
I see.
And we're 2 feet higher than last year. But all but about 1.5 feet of that is from bringing in imported water from Northern California.
I see. In other words, following a wet winter last year, starting this 1, 2, 3 months of this year, 2018, though, we're still not expecting anything or have anything equivalent to what we did last year by 3 months into the year.
Right.
Okay, very good. And to Ken, you know, lots of people even feel overjoyed for what we're seeing now. Now back in a little up north, you're even talking about mudslide, right? Because of a lot of water, though. That might indicate wrongfully to our audiences that we have enough water. For that, how do you want to clarify the water we see above ground and water we see below ground?
Well, the water that you see above ground in our reservoirs is a result of the situation last year that we had a good rain season up north. And so that generated enough water that they're able to move that water down and fill the reservoirs, which is really good because that allows us to be able to draw on that water during this year, which is turning out to be a very dry year, as Tony just pointed out. What we have to remember, though, is that on average here in California, for every 10 years, we're going to have 7 years of drought. So we need to be able to capture those 3 years where we have heavy rains and put that water in the ground or in reservoirs so we can store that water. But the message to your audience is more, we can't stop doing conservation. Whatever you were doing a couple of years ago to help conserve water, don't stop doing those things. So keeping your watering of your lawns and your landscaping, put it back to the same schedule you were on 2 years ago, and watch what you use inside the home, both in the way you wash your clothes and the way you take showers. All of those things are important in the final analysis, because what we're starting to see in talking with the water producers, who are the retail agencies here in the area, is they're starting to see their per capita, their per person use of water starting to creep up. And that means that we're using more water today than we were 2 years ago. We need to keep that down and understand that one good year of rain is not solving our problem. Drought is the normal, and you got to remember that. So we've got to watch what we use in the way of water.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. To a lot of my audiences, I believe that you probably be kind of wrongfully mystified about the rains we have, which is never enough to my dear friends who are the water people in my term, right? Who knows water exactly. It's the same thing. Lots of my colleagues in my business, I mean, with EDI, they have the sales department, right? Yeah. When I check with them, the sales department, they have basic salaries, they earn commissions, right? And then deeper in the discussion, I found out that they plan their expenses based upon their basic salary, never the income. All of a sudden, for example, this month I did a lot of work and I got money coming in like crazy, right? So that's a constant. That's not a constant way. So to save, to plan your expenditure based upon the most solid thing.
Yes.
And the most solid thing is that one, if I take it right, is that for California, we have 7 years out of every 10 being drought years. So that is our regular basic salary month or something like that.
And you just think back 6 years, 5 years we were in drought. We had one good year last year statewide that pulled us out of that drought, but now it looks like we're going right back into it again. This year, as Tony mentioned, we are below 50% of normal, even with all the rains we're getting in March. Just think how bad it'd have been if we didn't get that March rain. We normally don't get this kind of rain in March. Usually it's December, January, and February. All of a sudden in this year in March, we're getting some good rains. That's helping us, but it still won't even get us back to normal.
All right.
Well, and we talked before about the basin, as the groundwater basin, and the reservoirs as your savings account. So the surface reservoirs are much more volatile if you compare them more to like if you were going to invest, they're more up and down. But the groundwater basins, we've drawn off of the groundwater basins now for 5 years. So 1 year, because of just the physical way that it replenishes itself, it takes longer for the soil to get saturated and then to move the water.
After all, we got 2 more feet of the groundwater, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Out of the 2 more feet, we have we still have, on top of that, we still have 1.5 feet as compared to back to normal years, right?
Yes.
Good years.
Yes.
Yeah. In other words, we're 1.5 feet away.
Where in a good winter, it can come up 60 feet. So that if that gives you a comparison of.
In other words, if I put the parameter, like say, the normal years is at a 0 point though, we're kind of minus, 1.5 feet minus. Yeah. Right? We used to be 2.5 minus. Now we're 2 feet out, but still
a little
minus.
We've gained a little ground, but we're still way below where we should be.
I see.
So what Tony hasn't pointed out is that the groundwater basin is supposed to be managed within a range of 50 feet. We are already 20 feet below that bottom of where we're supposed to range. So we are 70 feet now below where we would be at our maximum.
Oh, in the longer run.
So if you look at the range of where we're supposed to be in terms of our groundwater basin, we're below the minimum already. Trying to get back to that.
I see.
So, so we're still catching up.
Now the 0 is not the original 0. It's kind of already at the bottom 0.
That's right.
We're below that. We're a negative for 1.5 feet.
Yeah, if you think about that as your savings account, we are overdrafted.
All right, good. Oh yeah, the saving account thing might make some sense. Okay, now you have like 20,000 in your saving account, right?
Yeah.
And then the saving account minimum, that when the bank says you're gonna remain 1,500, something like that, right?
Yeah.
We're
and
below
now
the-
you're below the 1,500.
That's
point.
right.
Yes.
Even though you still have surplus, the money is
Yeah.
yours. Nobody
Yes.
else
And-
can take it, and yet you're at 1,300 instead of 1,500.
And
That's
yes,
exactly right.
and so that's why the message that we try to give the
I
public
see.
is the
I
fact
see.
that
I see.
that the 1 year is good.
All right.
And things start to look a little green and everything, but we still need.
All right, I'm going to continue to use the saving account module to explain where we are. My dear audience, today, in the week of the good rain that we have, we started thinking, especially here as a show who trace all the way how California is doing on water though. Once again, I have my dear friend, Mr. Ken Manning of Water Quality of California, and Mr. Tony Zampiello of Water Master of California, two the master hands on water here talking about California water. Let's take a very short moment out. When we come back, we'll start once again from the saving account point of view to see if we can catch up with the $20,000 level. So stay with us. Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences, ladies and gentlemen, my dear fellow Californians, welcome back to the show talking about California water. California, one of the most beautiful states in the United States, yet one of the driest in the United States, because we are on the verge, we're to the end of the slope. Everything, we never have water. We do have water, and well, majority of them goes to water, goes to the ocean. Well, it goes back to Mother Nature. And poor Californians have to struggle so much to keep ourselves alive, to keep ourselves afloat on water. So today, once again, in the wake of several rain that we had already, talking about California water, I'm joined by my dear friend Ken Manning, Water Quality of California, and Mr. Tony Zampiello, Water Master of California. Once again, to both of you, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
All right, good. I really like the concept of a saving account. Suppose to keep a family my size, my minimum supposed to be having like say 20,000, for example, in the bank, the saving account, right? This is the line on the in the parameter. This is the zero, supposed to be zero of my level.
Right.
And at the bank, they say the bank account minimum, right? You have to maintain, for example, $1,500 as the lowest. Otherwise, the account is canceled.
Right.
Right. So now we are little back to the bank level only. Am I right?
Yeah. And in your analogy, we're at about $1,300. And so we need to get back to that $1,500 minimum, but we'd like to be back up to $20,000 at some point. Now, the only way we're going to get to that $20,000 is if we have a really good rain year and the state of California and other agencies cooperate and we're able to import that water into Southern California and get it into the ground, which is what Tony's agency does.
But one thing for sure, Tony, is that we are below the bank limit.
Yes, if you were to continue the household analogy, it's like Ken had kind of mentioned at the break. You've got the surface water that's kind of your checking account. You've got the groundwater basins that's the savings. So if you make just enough to pay your rent, your car payment, and everything else, if in the 6th month you get a big medical bill, you have to go to your savings.
You don't have a surplus. You don't have extra energy or extra whatever accessibility to deal with all of a sudden a medical bill of $6,000 or $16,000.
So the positive side of that is in the really bad 5 years that we had, we had that savings in the ground that we could draw on for that emergency. Last year was a good winter. We gained a little bit of ground. We've put a little bit back. So we've put about 1/5 of it, maybe 1/10 of it back.
All right, okay,
and so now, we need to keep adding to that. And this year it doesn't.
I'm so glad that I get you guys both on here for the show, because a lot of my folks even think that we are doing better. We're back to normal.
Yeah, no.
That's false, right?
Yeah, that's false.
And then I started to understand. I wish to bring this to the awareness of my audience, my lovely brother, sister, of my fellow Californians, that we are still below the bank limit.
Yeah, that's true.
Below the bank limit. Oh my God. So now, it looks that. Do we ever have a chance to go back to the 20,000? Suppose the 20,000 is, I just borrow that as a token, right?
Yeah.
To the 20,000 level in the coming years. Is there a possibility, or ever?
Sure. I mean, if you know, the big question and the big discussion and the buzzword now that's used in all kinds of levels, but in our industry, is climate change. You know, we can't predict the future, but we know in the past, we can see when we've had years where we had that good year I talked about was 20 inches of rain, when we've had 30, 35 inches of rain, which is possible. We can put half of that savings back in the ground because we have the facilities. The other thing that we're looking at, because we can't just assume that the future is going to go back to the way it was, is that we're looking at ways to use recycled water that people have already used in their household or for other, you know, some folks are talking about even potentially some that goes into the storm drain, treating that to a level that it can be put back in the basin. And that we've learned a lot through the drought, through conservation, what the baseline of that amount might be. The problem with that is it takes infrastructure, it takes building pipes, it takes pumps and energy to do that. And now the other challenge that we have, and Ken and I are going up to Sacramento next week to talk about all kinds of issues that impact water, is how do we, with folks from disadvantaged communities that can't have access to clean water, or that can't fully financially pay their bills, how, you know, we're being asked as water agencies to somehow mitigate that issue too.
That's more towards water policy, water politics.
Right.
But it impacts the cost and the availability for us to do these projects.
Yeah, I still want to meander on this subject because lots of people, lots of folks that at least within my circle, of my immediate contact circle, they have questions. And there was the other day a bunch of us who came here as an early time. I came here for 34 years already. I still remember driving on the street back then in summertime. Most of the spectacular would be you pull over by the curb watching those bikini girls fighting, do the hose fight.
I don't know where you found that, but I did.
In Alhambra. I used to live in Alhambra, right?
That's where they were.
They do their hose fight.
Yeah.
Okay, in bikinis. Okay, you never watch like that. Okay, question. Back then, I mean, is it that we did not have the water problem, or the water problem started already we were not aware of? Or is it because only the recent years the weather pattern has changed? What causes the difference so much?
All of the above. The fact is that we've had climate change. We don't need to say for what reason. A lot of people have different opinions. But the bottom line is that climate is changing, which is causing us to have more years of drought and less years of good rain. But the other thing is we had a smaller population. 40 years ago, population of California was 20% less than it is now. So we had fewer people occupying the same space, using less water, and that water was more available. And plus we had less environmental restrictions than we have today. So we have a narrower frame to work with in terms of the amount of water we have available. So all of those things have added to the environment where you're not going to see those, despite your objection, bikini-clad ladies out hose fight, because that's now illegal in most cities. There's an ordinance against using hoses
in
like
California
that.
now is illegal.
You can't do it. And so now what you have to do is you have to take your car to a car wash where they recycle their own water. But you're not going to see, using water outside the home is being looked at very closely, because that's where about 70% of your water actually is spent, is outside the home, landscaping and washing things and outside. So that's where we're starting to concentrate more on people conserving water, is outside. So you're looking at people changing their landscaping so they use less water. I personally have already done that, and I saved as much as 70% of my
You're talking about the artificial turfs, right?
Well, no, I'm just talking about changing plants. We went from grass, which uses a lot of water, grass does, to just even California-friendly plants that are really beautiful, but less green all the time. And that's what we're using in our yard now, and we've reduced our consumption by 70%.
Okay. So do you think that is, well, of course, I do take the philosophy of everything combined, everything of the above, right? Something like that. What plays major, though?
Well, I think the two major things are really the fact that some of the major projects that are starting to age, that move water around the state, are facing different challenges than when they were first built. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot more, there's a law in California that's been in place for some time that says that you have to look at all of the environmental impacts to what you do. And there's a list of different plants, different things, all kinds of factors, down to noise and other things that you have to look at for the project. So that's part of it. And then the other part is just that some of these streams, for years, locally, the LA River, you look at it and it's concrete lined. And maybe 100 years ago, there was a species that flourished in that river before it was developed. And
Rosemead, the Wadi area, there's a river. How do you call that river?
Is it Rio Hondo?
I don't know how you call it. It's across Rosemead area, across Garvey. The river.
That's it. Yeah, now they call it
There used to be a river there.
Right.
I can testify.
Yeah.
In old days when I came over, that was the river. Now it's a concrete bed.
Yes. Yeah.
Nothing but a bed.
And the concrete's meant to protect the structures around it, because we have these, whenever you hear on the news that there's a flash flood watch, or you get it on your phone, that's not necessarily good for us, because anything flash means that we may not be able to capture those peaks. And so those channels were meant to move them out of the area to save structures and lives and all of that.
Right, for public safety.
But what happens is, like when my parents came and settled in the San Gabriel Valley right after World War II, they weren't lined. So all of that water would percolate into the ground and it would replenish the groundwater. And as they're lined, it gets moved out of the area. And so we're going back now to say, well, what can we do, hopefully with these structures in place, to keep the water and still save the structure? So there's a challenge that we have. But there may have been a indigenous frog that was noted to be there 100 years ago, or a bird that nested near the water. And so now we have to take all of that into consideration whenever we want to change operations or do a new project. So we just plan and budget to set aside maybe
In other words, if we say we work so hard to bring a future to California, I would rather say we'll somehow we have to bring ourselves back to the old California.
In some ways, but it's a little bit different. I mean, because what we're not talking about maybe taking all the concrete away from the channels, because if you do that, you're going to put in jeopardy the lives and safeties of the people who live along it. Yeah. Because for years, when we get those rains that Tony was talking about just a few minutes ago that were 25, 35 inches, you're talking about wiping out an entire neighborhood of homes along the river. We can't afford to do that. So what we want to do is keep the bottom of the channel to where it can percolate water. And another important resource for us is the San Gabriel River, which is not lined. It has boundaries on it,
I see.
It is not lined. If you look along there, that water is percolating down to the ground. That's a tremendous resource we have here in the San Gabriel Valley that the city of Los Angeles doesn't have.
You're talking about efforts combined.
Yes.
Efforts combined,
yes.
Right? Anyway. My dear audience, today I'm so happy that we put this show together for you. California is a dry state for sure. It's being confirmed day by day, and in an even more solid way. With me today are my dear friends, two master hands on water, Mr. Ken Manning of Water Quality, and Mr. Tony Zampiello, former water master. To be more specific, even though they are the hands on water of California, one, for example, Mr. Manning for water quality, right? And then you, Tony, for water allocation? Somehow.
Pretty,
right? Okay,
yeah.
great.
Well,
and then I have different questions to ask each of you when we come back. My dear audience, we'll be right back, please. Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences, my dear fellow Californians. Welcome back to the show. As a matter of fact, it's a talk about California water. Water, oxygen, sunshine are those basic, very basic elements that you keep on breathing, right? So water for California is so precious. It's getting more and more precious on each passing day. With me today talking about water, especially shortly after the rain. Oh, by the way, we're still seeing another rain coming. They say by Saturday or somewhere somehow. Yeah. Are we okay? Are we doing better? Are we doing same? Are we doing worse whatsoever? So that's the whole discussion. According to the discussion previous two segments, we understand we are doing a little better comparatively 2 years ago, and yet we're still below the level, right, below zero. So back to you. You are once again welcome to the show. Though I got a question. They are saying now that our water resources are that tight, because you're in charge of water quality. So do we still keep the same standards of drinking water?
Absolutely.
In other words, people worried, oh yeah, we're so short on water, and that is the decontamination is so costly. So are we lowering our standard for our drinking water, cooking water, household water?
No, as a matter of fact, many of our standards are being reviewed right now, and some of them are actually being lowered. Even in this drought period, it's still important that the people who are drinking water right out of your faucet is absolutely pure and clean. The water that they're drinking out of their faucets is some of the best water in the world. Now, sometimes people might find that they turn on the faucet and it might have a strange color to it. Sometimes that's because of the piping systems that are involved in their house. But the actual water, when it gets into the pipeline headed to their home, it's actually some of the best water in the world. So when that happens,
let it float a bit, right?
Just a little bit, and usually it'll clear up. But those are the general problems. But when you think about around the world, the people who have problems with their water, even in countries that are doing very well, China, for instance, you can drink the water. You can't drink the water out of the faucets in China in most places, but here in California, anywhere you go, anywhere in the United States, you can drink the water.
That's one of the thing that I feel proud of California. And last time I learned from my friend, Dr. Dr. Rong of Los Angeles, says that everywhere you see a tap, open it, that's safe water, right?
That's right.
So that's why I'm asking you, are we as safe as we are supposed to?
Yes, absolutely. All of the water agencies that we work with take great pride in the fact that the water that they are using, and they are overseen by the Division of Drinking Water, which used to be called the Department of Public Health. Now it's the Division of Drinking Water. That agency oversees the quality of their water, and they test their water multiple times during the day to make sure that there hasn't been any changes in the quality of the water that's coming to the home.
Thank you very much, because lots of folks are worried. It was last time at dinner they talk about. I say, I know a bunch of water guys, and they're close. They are on my show constantly. I keep in mind that I will ask. So all of a sudden I thought about that asking, right? To water allocations, though, if we want to look at a whole pie named the California water, right? I understand a big portion of it, when we have water by Mother Nature, given by Mother Nature, goes back to Mother Nature. If we want to draw ourselves a whole pie, how big is the part by percent we return to Mother Nature, and how much we keep? And pretty much like the pie that you showed me, prior to we start the show, though. Yeah, you want to give us a little ideas about how much?
Well, sure, I can start, and then I think Ken can kind of articulate too, maybe a little better than me. But basically, again, I go back to when we talk about flash floods or when we get it. It's very important to us that when we talk about climate change, especially in Northern California, people see those surface reservoirs, but the mountains are a huge reservoir. That snow is a huge reservoir, because if that all came as rain, we wouldn't be able to capture it. So from year to year, it can be order of magnitude bigger flows, amazing flows that can come through, but the idea is that we capture it. So what happens in Northern California is you have it come as snow, like in Mammoth. The skiers loved last year because we got a big snowfall.
Snow cap.
But also what the state measures for is the content of that snow. It can be real puffy snow and maybe not have as much rain, water content in it. So that's measured, and then as long as the temperatures work correctly and work out for us, the reservoirs, they release from the reservoirs, they get drainage almost all year long,
right?
And we get it. Now, if you look at our, as an example, the last storms that we got, we were lucky. This year we got some cold storms, not tropical. There was on the mountains that we could see, there was snow on this side that I had people comment to me, well, it looks like Mount Baldy's going to be open this year. Well, the thing of it is, 2 days later, which is kind of Southern California weather, I don't attribute that as much to climate change. We have 70, 80 degree weather. It's facing the sun. That snow doesn't stick around as long as it does. So our capacity and our reservoirs are designed differently. But as far as the big picture, you know, we're constantly under pressure to leave more of that water for Mother Nature, for systems that may or may not have ever been naturally that way. And the example I use is our basin is so porous. When people talk about the San Gabriel River was never wet all year round, like maybe if you go up to the American or these other rivers.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
So when you're trying to educate community groups that say, well, you know, it's a river and I've just moved here from XYZ, it should be wet all the time. It doesn't. It doesn't. Well, I mean, really, what used to happen before the flood control system is it would just spread out. That's why we have cities like Artesia, Lakewood. It would just spread out on the valley floor, and you'd have these cienagas kind of type.
Right.
And so you know, that's the education that we're working so hard for, is to say, we can do both, like the project that Ken talked about, where maybe you make that channel that you told me a story one time of you used to go eat lunch next to a channel that flowed water all the time, and now it's just concrete. Well, maybe the compromise is to have a little of both, where you could go and ride your bike and you could do these other things.
Right?
But when you talk about aging infrastructure, you talk about changing it, what people have to know is that all adds to the cost of either the water that you're using it from or the park fees that you're
look
paying.
at the Drought, what is that, Drought Bank? What is the bank? Drought Bank?
Oh,
the dam?
The
dam, the Drought Dam or what?
No, it's the Santa Fe Dam.
Oh, Santa Fe Dam,
Yes.
by 605,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So I kept asking myself, the fact that they built up a dam that high, though, suppose a long time ago there was water there, or otherwise what do they do for it?
Well, but only water in a winter. You know, when I was a kid in the 1969, there were massive floods here, and it just so happened to be that these hills had all burned at the same time.
All right.
So there were mud flows and everything.
But no longer now.
Well,
No wintertime, we don't even see water.
it's an insurance policy. In 2005, it was full, and it was flowing 40,000 CFS. It was so. You know,
Anyway.
it's the understanding of what the facility's really for.
Okay, very good. I thank you for that statement. I try to put everything together, though. So by what has been explained so far, by whatever Mother Nature gives us, we'd rather wish that Mother Nature give us more snow than rain. Am I right in the first spot?
Oh yeah, I mean, because the water, if it's as snow, as Tony said, it's a reservoir. It holds
It's
the
a
water.
reservoir,
It releases
and
slowly.
melting, slowly release, right?
Yes.
Now, you are also talking about a trend of the world climate change is going warmer, the world warming. So in other words, what we expect, which is for Mother Nature to give us more snow than water, than rain, is going to be just going the opposite way.
That's right.
Could, yeah.
The Mother Nature by then will give us less and less snow.
That's right, which means we need to have facilities like reservoirs above ground and use our groundwater basins to store as much of that water as possible. And that's what we as water managers are talking about statewide, is that we need to have a more robust system that captures that water above ground and below ground.
Yeah,
and
you're right,
that
you're
stores
right,
it for times when we're dry. That's what we have to achieve,
That's
hopefully in the near future.
That's what we are facing in the long run.
Yes.
In the long run, there's going to be less and less snow. So whatever water in the rain form we have, we better keep it.
Yes, that's right.
We want to keep it as much as we can, right?
That's right.
So now for rainwater, if we take rainwater of 100% though, what kind of percentage we are capable of reserving, of keeping it?
Well,
including going to aqueducts, going to underground, whatever. So altogether, how much can we keep out of rainwater?
Well, let's talk about in large perspective this pie on average. If you go back and look at the rainfall over California over say the last 100 years, and the average year you make that one large big pie. 50% of the rain that falls on the state of California will be used up by the environment. Some of that will flow out through San Francisco. Most of that water is actually taken up into the root systems by our plants, into the groundwater systems. Some of that water is going into the environment somewhere. We're not capable of capturing that water. The other 50% is the water that we find that we are capable of using here in California. Of that 50%, a little over 50% of it is used by agriculture.
The 50 over the 50.
50%. So now we're talking only 25% of all the water that falls is available for use by you and I and others in the state of California.
Including industry.
That's right, including industry.
Yeah.
So when we start talking about the amount of water that's being used in the home and around the home, we're talking in the 5 to 7% of all the water that's used that falls in the state of California. So what we're talking about trying to do is capture small percentages of water that are going to make a big difference in the future. Plus we're working with agriculture to try and get them to become more efficient in the way they use water, using maybe their crops to go to more drip systems and more efficient water systems. That'll make more water available for growth in California, because here we are at roughly almost 40 million people here in the state of California. It's not going to stay that way. We're going to 50, 60 million people over the next 20, 25 years. So we've got a plan for growth, which means that we need to figure out how we're going to stretch that water even more. Maybe even trying to capture more of that water that's currently being lost into the environment and out the San Francisco, below San Francisco Bridge, capturing more of that water and actually storing it in the ground or in our reservoirs.
Exactly. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. I would say what the two statements combined, that would be the resolution for California on water, right? So on one hand, we have to try to keep as much water as possible, and then we still got to shrink ourselves we call it water stingy. Let's do it that way, right? So, my dear friends, let's take a very short moment out. When we come back, we'll still look around a little bit, see if we can talk about the other 50% that's going away or that we are giving up away. So if we can get something from that part, stay with us, please. Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences. Welcome back to the show, Jack Chow on the East West Show with the GNE TV. Today, I'm so glad that I have two friends on water, here to talk about California water right after the few times rain that we feel excited about. Of course, it is always right to have some rain and to be a little excited. However, we're not changing the fate of California so far. At least we can't foresee that. So with me are two wonderful water masters, and Mr. Tony Zampiello of California Water Master, and Mr. Ken Manning of California Water Quality. From both ends, I checked about California water situation. We are a little better than last year, and compared to a year ago, 2 years ago, we're a little better. However, to normal years, we're still way, way, way below. We're at the minus point. Okay, now, to get over to the problems or to cope along with the worsening situations, though, we have nothing but to keep on being stingy with water, right? So, okay, back to the big pie, the whole pie, though. We're talking about almost 50% of the pie goes back to Mother Nature because of the natural flow, because of flooding, because of the early melt of snow caps, and so on and so forth, because the incapability of aqueducts to hold that much, though, so on and so forth. Versus the fact that what we are operating now, within 5 or 6%, right? Could we get to 5 or 6% from the other 50% of the big pie instead of or add up as an effort? So you know what I mean, right? Yeah.
Well, I think that the answer to your question is actually yes, we could, but we're constantly fighting elements of nature, and that is that we have laws now to protect the environment. The Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies are there to protect them. Plus, there's a number of environmental organizations, and we, I think, have a responsibility as human beings to make sure that we protect those species that are vulnerable in the state of California. But that doesn't mean that we can't be a little more efficient on how we take water from that 50% that goes to the environment and look at ways that we could increase the amount of water that comes into use for human consumption and use here in Southern California and in Northern California. I think we need to continuously be reviewing all of that without putting those species in jeopardy. It does get a little bit frustrating at times for us when we have to, would do with things that we think are completely ridiculous to protect a bird or a small fish or something like that that's endangered. But it is important, and we need to try and do that when we can. But we got to remember that we've got to have water for us to live as well.
I do understand. You gentlemen both are professionals and the politician yourself, because you deal with politics on the other hand, right? You have to be politically right. That I don't argue, and I don't give you a hard time, right? But the thing is that we, human race, is the only race that can talk, that can think, right? So now, and it is totally right to protect a bird, to protect the fish while we can. Are we saying that we got to protect the bird, the fish, whatsoever, at a sacrifice to ourselves?
Well, I think really that when we sit in meetings with these folks, the argument isn't whether the fish is of value or whether the bird is of value. It's really more about approach, and the example I can use is stormwater capture and compliance. The laws are such now that the city that we're in, if they allow on a day like today certain flows to run off the property and into the storm drain, they could technically be in violation of regulations. So the question is, what do you call a real stream where the bird or the fish may be? And because it's a strict interpretation of the federal law, it says once it gets into that closed vessel, technically it has to be treated to all that level. So when you look at it from an economic standpoint, somebody who develops this property has to either treat or make sure that doesn't run off, and it all adds cost to the rent here. Where in reality, if you could move that all to a central site, treat it before it really gets into the real natural stream where the fish or the bird might be, that seems like the more practical approach. So it's really the ways that you go to protect the environment. I don't think anybody would argue that lead into the drinking supply or the ocean or anything else is bad. But the issue is, at what point can you let something flow off this property, go 2 miles down and collect it from 15 other properties and treat it and then put it into the stream where your children or someone else might be to contact?
Once again, I want to combine both statements all together to make it my statement, though. I understand the environment protection is so important. As human race, we got to do our part to protect it, right? And then my only concern is that we are not doing it at our sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to let Jack Chow die for a bird to live, something like that, simple like that. On the other hand, do we slaughter? Do we eat porks? Do we eat beef? How about chicken? How about fish? How about lobsters, right? Okay, in New York, once they had an argument by saying that the lobsters were shipped from Hong Kong, they were in plastic bags tied up, right? The argument was that you sophisticate them and they die halfway. What's the difference between they die halfway, they die at your cooking pot? The same thing. So we want to call a spade a spade.
Yes.
Right? Now, a spade is a spade. It only depends how you name it, how politicians name it, right? So now, my point is that I believe that I stand for lots of my folks, right? My audiences, right? Politically, if we shift around our efforts a little bit, we can easily get the 5% out of the 50% that we have given up to kind of minimize the problem, the pressure that we're facing now. Do you think I make a point? I have no intention of going against you. I know you guys politicians.
I think and Ken can put a finer point on it, but really to take something that you had said in your discussion, it's more about what's sustainable. And you mentioned fishing. You know, if I know that if you've ever watched that show, The Deadliest Catch, they used to just go out and grab as many crab or whatever as they possibly could, and then they realized over the years, we need a system, we need to add some common sense to this so that each year there are enough crab to breed and all of that.
Exactly.
So really what I kind of try and preach is what's practical. What level is there a danger? We've talked for years about the contaminants in groundwater, and the sad thing is that if we could all just sit here and say water is the only thing that anybody in California has to worry about, it'd be great, except for we need roads improvement, we need the pipe, the city's pipes and meters and all of that. So there has to be a practical, there can't be a
overall take.
That's
Yeah, I don't think that's an either-or situation. I don't think we need to look at it as if we're going to sacrifice those fish or those birds or something. That really what we need to do is there are extremists on both sides, and there are those who say we have no right to do to impinge upon their habitat, and that I don't believe anything whatsoever. I think that we need to, as we grow as a civilization, we need to keep in mind that there are others out there, other things out there that use the same air, the same water, and need a habitat to live in. And we need to make sure that we do everything we can to try and protect that at the same time as we allow for growth. And now, if that means that we use a little less water, okay, that means we use a little less water.
Sure.
Does that mean we get no water? Not acceptable. So we need to make sure that we continuously talk with that's other side of the aisle to make sure that the environmentalists don't take everything a little bit too far, and that we bring things back to what can be done. Like I said, I don't think it's an either or. I think if we talk with each other and come to some reasonable conclusions, we can find ways to make sure that we don't kill our host at the same time we have water.
I remember Tony said in the very beginning of our show, said you guys are going to Sacramento shortly after this week or something to talk. That's one of the the ways you negotiate with those legislators, right?
Yes.
Okay, now you go to Santa Monica, go to some of the fishing resort, right? They have limitations. under a certain range by length or by weight, whatever, you're supposed to let go, something like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I love it because it shows our way, our care of the Mother Nature for the inhabitant to grow, to reproduce themselves like that. Right? So I hate to put a zero. So no fishing at all.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's no way. And then that's why I call it as a sacrifice.
Yeah.
To sacrifice people's freedom, our freedom to access the water, given up to two little fish called smelt, something like that. Those are the areas I disagree. My lovely audiences, my dear fellow Californians, it is a serious talk talking about our California water. I really appreciate, I highly appreciate my dear friends, Mr. Manning and Mr. Zampiello of Water Quality and the Water Master. They're here on a constant basis, even random but constant basis, to catch up with us about California water. Every time I take that as an education, also the education extended to my audiences. Number one, conclusion, we're not getting any more water. We got to be tight on what we have.
That's right.
Number two, we have been doing so far so good. Keep up doing the good things to save water. And then we have these people working with the politicians. Well, sooner or later, they might have something work out, right? Okay. To wrap it up, you have 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I think the final thing I'd like to put on the table here is to the listeners who are watching this show, is that in the area of California, especially Southern California, whatever you were doing 2 years ago for conservation, continue to do it today. Just because we had rain last night and we're going to have it tomorrow and maybe again on Tuesday,
regardless,
that still doesn't mean the drought is over with. We need to continuously be vigilant on conserving water as much as we can so that it lasts longer, so we don't go further into debt into our savings account.
Thank you very much. Understood. And you, Tony?
Well, I think the one thing I want to point out is that all the news isn't bad news. With the good rain that we had last year, with the rain that we're having this year, the watershed is not as dry. It's more receptive to the water and the smaller storms that we're getting. And the other thing is that every day that we get rain like this, as long as people know to turn off their irrigation and do things, you know, I'll turn it off for 5 days after a rain like this, and it'll be fine. So what that means is if we're not pumping it out of the ground, it's just like saving it. So the cooler temperatures, the wetter, even though it's not pouring down, it's not all bad.
All right, good, very good. That reminds me of a friend of mine, his son, at the age of third grade, and he did a drawing that won the award of that year. Was that a little guy, picture one, going out of the home, and the second picture was that rain coming down, and the third picture goes back to turn off the tap, something like that. For that masterpiece,
good message.
won a big award for that year, though. So, all right, with that, we want to wrap up this show today. Thank you for watching, my dear friends, and the credit goes to Mr. Ken Manning and Mr. Tony Zampiello. So, thank you very much, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.